The awakening. A loud hissing sound filled the air. Cold vapor poured from the edges of the stasis pod as the metal lid slowly lifted. Inside, a man lay motionless, his body stiff, his breath shallow. His mind swam in darkness, trapped between dreams and reality. Then, suddenly, air. His lungs expanded as he gasped, choking on the sudden rush of oxygen. His fingers twitched, then curled into fists. His eyes fluttered open. Bright lights blinded him. He squinted, trying to adjust. His vision was blurry, his muscles weak. He felt heavy, as if gravity itself was pressing down on him harder than before. Where am I? His thoughts were sluggish, as if waking from the deepest sleep. He tried to move but found his arms and legs too weak to obey. Slowly, his hearing sharpened. Voices, soft, unfamiliar, speaking in a strange yet melodic tone. Then, footsteps. A figure appeared above him, a silhouette against the blinding lights. As his vision cleared, the figure took shape. A woman, but not human. Her skin was smooth and black like polished obsidian, glowing faintly under the golden light of the room. Her eyes were large and violet, shimmering like distant stars. A long, elegant robe draped over her form, and atop her head sat a crown of silver. She was tall, powerful, regal. She looked down at him, her gaze intense but filled with something else, something strange. Relief, hope. She opened her mouth and spoke, not in an alien tongue, but in perfect English. Finally, you are awake, my soulmate. Ethan Carter's breath caught in his throat. His heart pounded. He stared at her, confusion swirling in his mind. Soulmate. His voice was hoarse when he finally spoke. Who are you? A small smile touched the woman's lips, though her eyes shimmered with emotions he didn't understand. I am Queen Syra of the Zenari Empire, she said, her voice smooth like silk. And you, Ethan Carter, have been asleep for 10,000 years. His chest tightened. His mind reeled. 10,000 years. That was impossible. It had to be some kind of mistake. He tried to sit up, but his body betrayed him. His arms buckled, his vision spun. He collapsed back into the pod, breathing heavily. Syra moved closer. She placed a hand on his forehead, a gentle touch, but her skin was cold. You are weak, she said softly. Your body will take time to recover. You have slept longer than any human before you. Human. The word struck him like a blade. His home, his people. He licked his dry lips, forcing himself to ask the question that burned in his mind. Where is Earth? Zyra's expression changed. Sadness, a flicker of hesitation. Her answer came like a whisper of wind before a storm. Gone. Ethan's blood ran cold. No, that can't be right. His hands clenched into fists. His mind screamed at him to deny it. You're lying. Zyra's violet eyes darkened, but there was no anger in them, only sorrow. I wish I were, she said, but Earth was destroyed. Thousands of years ago. Ethan shook his head. This isn't real. This can't be real. He grabbed the edge of the pod and forced himself up. His muscles screamed in protest, his body trembling under its own weight, but he refused to stay down. The room around him became clearer. The walls were smooth and metallic, curved in a way no human architecture ever was. Strange floating orbs of light hovered near the ceiling, casting a soft golden glow. In the corners, armored figures stood tall, watching him closely. They were not human. He was not on Earth. Panic surged through him, but he swallowed it down. He needed answers. He turned his gaze back to Syra, his voice sharp with frustration. Why am I here? Syra tilted her head slightly, as if she had been expecting that question. Because you were meant to be, she said. You were chosen long ago to be my mate. Ethan froze. Mate. The word sent a chill down his spine. It didn't make sense. Nothing made sense. He took a step back, His legs nearly gave out, but he caught himself against the pod. His mind raced through 1,000 possibilities. Was this some kind of dream? A trick? A mistake? He had gone to sleep on Earth. He had gone into stasis for what? A few years. A century at most. Not 10,000 years. Not long enough for Earth to be gone. And certainly not to wake up and find out he was the soulmate of an alien queen. He gritted his teeth. No, this is wrong. I don't belong here. Zaira stepped closer, and for the first time, he saw something else in her eyes. Fear. Not of him. Of losing him. You do, she whispered. You are the last human left in the universe, Ethan. And you are mine. His breath hitched. The last human. No, that wasn't possible. It couldn't be. His heart pounded like a war drum in his chest. He had to get out of here. He had to escape. But how do you run when you are the last of your kind? The alien empire and the Queen's claim. Ethan Carter sat stiffly in the massive golden-lit chamber, his hands gripping the arms of the chair he had been forced into. His body still felt heavy, his muscles weak from 10,000 years of sleep, but his mind was a whirlwind of confusion and anger. The air smelled strange, not artificial, not sterile, but rich with something unfamiliar, sweet, almost floral. The walls of the chamber pulsed faintly, like they were alive, humming with unseen energy. The ceiling arched high above, covered in glowing constellations, shifting and swirling as if they were mapping the very stars. And across from him, sitting on a throne of silver and crystal, was Queen Kyra. She watched him with those unnerving violet eyes, filled with something he still couldn't understand. Possession, expectation, hope. Ethan clenched his jaw. His thoughts raced. Earth is gone. I'm the last human. And she thinks I belong to her. It was madness. He glared at her. What do you mean, I was meant for you? Zaira didn't flinch at his hostility. Instead, she leaned forward, resting her elbows on the armrests of her throne, studying him like a puzzle waiting to be solved. You are not an ordinary human, Ethan, she said, her voice smooth and controlled. You were chosen for a purpose greater than you ever knew. Ethan scoffed. Chosen by who? Zaira's lips curled into a small, knowing smile. By the Zenari. The word sent a cold shiver down his spine. Zenari. The same species as her. The ones who had taken him, if they had even taken him at all. Had they been the ones to put him into stasis? Had his life on Earth been nothing more than a lie? He shook his head. I don't believe you. Zaira sighed softly, as if she had expected his denial. She lifted her hand, and instantly, a holographic image appeared in the air before him. It flickered to life. A recording. And what Ethan saw nearly stole the breath from his lungs. A baby, a human baby, floating in a glass tank filled with glowing blue liquid. Strange machines surrounded it, scanning, pulsing with energy. And then, Zenari scientists, tall, sleek like Exara, but dressed in white armor and intricate robes. They moved around the child, examining him, whispering in their language. Ethan stared, his hands tightening into fists. And then the screen shifted. The baby grew, faster than normal. A child now. His features looked too familiar. Too much like him. His stomach twisted. No, this isn't real. But the recording continued. The child. He was placed in a pod identical to the one he had woken up in. Zenari symbols flashed across the screens as the stasis sequence activated. A machine voice spoke in Zenari, but this time, Ethan could understand. Project Titan is ready for long-term preservation. The Queen's mate has been prepared. Ethan's body went ice-cold. The screen flickered off. Silence filled the chamber. He felt like the air had been sucked from his lungs. His entire life. His memories. Were they real? His head snapped toward Zaira, his voice sharp. What the hell did you do to me? Zyra's gaze softened, but her posture remained strong. We did not create you. We enhanced you. You were designed to be stronger, smarter, to survive the centuries. Ethan shook his head violently. No, I was born on Earth. I had a family. I had a... Zyra tilted her head slightly. A childhood filled with gaps. Moments where you were stronger, faster than those around you. Dreams of things you could not explain. Ethan opened his mouth, but no words came, because she was right. The memories flooded back, small, strange moments from his life that he had always ignored. The way he had never been sick. The way he had healed too quickly. The way his mind could process things faster than others. His hands trembled. He wasn't human, or at least, not fully. Zyra stood from her throne, stepping toward him. Ethan, I know this is difficult to accept, but you were always meant to be mine. The Zenari do not simply take mates. We are bound by fate. Ethan gritted his teeth. That's your belief, not mine. Zyra stopped in front of him. She was taller than him, her presence overwhelming, like standing before a storm. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Then tell me you don't feel it. Ethan wanted to tell her she was wrong, that this was all some insane mistake. But deep inside him, something stirred. A pull, a connection he couldn't explain. Like he had known her before he had even woken up. His hands curled into fists. No, he wouldn't let this control him. Zyra took a deep breath. Ethan, listen to me. The Zenari Empire stands on the edge of war. There are those who do not believe in the prophecy, who do not accept you as my mate. They will try to kill you. Ethan's blood ran cold. They will never accept you, Zyra continued, unless you prove yourself. Ethan narrowed his eyes. And what happens if I refuse? Zyra's expression darkened. Then they will hunt you. Silence filled the chamber. Ethan's mind raced. He was trapped in an alien empire, forced into a role he never agreed to. But one thing was clear, he wasn't safe. And if he didn't find a way to escape soon, he might never be. Escaping the Queen's palace. The palace was alive. Ethan could feel it, the strange, rhythmic hum beneath his bare feet as he walked. The walls, smooth and metallic, pulsed faintly as if breathing. Strange floating orbs of light hovered in the corridors, shifting in color as he moved. Everything around him was alien, too perfect, too advanced. And he needed to get out. The plan. Ethan had been in the palace for 3 days, watched constantly by Zenari guards. They were massive 7-foot-tall warriors, clad in sleek obsidian armor. Their weapons, thin, glowing blades, hummed with energy, capable of slicing through steel like butter. There were no windows, no doors leading outside. Every time he had asked where he was, the answer had been the same. You are home. No, this wasn't home. Home was Earth, even if it was gone. His mind refused to believe that last part. There had to be something left. A station, a colony, anything. He just needed a ship. And there was only one place in the palace where he could get one. The hangar bay. The escape begins. It was late, if time even worked the same way here. The corridors were quieter. The floating lights dimmed slightly, their golden glow softening. Ethan moved cautiously, his body still recovering from 10,000 years in stasis, but the strange enhancements in his DNA helped. His balance had returned faster than expected. His senses felt sharper, his mind more focused. He reached the main hall, keeping to the shadows. Zenari guards stood at attention near a large, circular door. It shimmered with blue energy, a security field blocking access. Ethan took a deep breath. No turning back. He had spent 3 days studying them, watching the way they moved, the way they held their weapons. He noticed something, a half-second delay when they activated their force shields. That was his window. He picked up a small metallic orb he had stolen from one of the palace tables. It looked like an alien fruit, but when squeezed, it emitted a high-frequency sound. Ethan hurled it down the hall. The moment it hit the floor, it let out a piercing shriek. The guards snapped to attention, their armor glowing as they turned toward the noise. Ethan ran. The fight. He was fast, faster than he should have been. His legs felt powerful, his muscles pushing harder than ever before. The enhancements in his body were kicking in. The first guard barely saw him coming. Ethan slammed his elbow into the alien's jaw, grabbing his weapon mid-fall. The energy blade hummed in his hand, lighter than he expected. The second guard reacted, swinging his blade in a wide arc. Ethan ducked. The blade sliced through the air, missing his head by inches. He lunged forward, ramming the stolen blade into the guard's armor seam. A flash of blue energy crackled as the armor failed. The guard collapsed. Alarms blared through the halls. The palace had detected the fight. Ethan ran. Reaching the hangar bay, the corridors opened up into a massive chamber, the hangar bay. And there, lined up like sleek obsidian arrows, were the ships. Zenari vessels were small and fast, built for interstellar travel. They were shaped like sharp crescents, with glowing blue engines at the rear. Ethan didn't waste a second. He sprinted toward the nearest one, hacking into the control panel with shaking fingers. The ship's interface glowed. Zenari script filled the screen. Locked. Recubuaries Royal Access. Ethan cursed. He needed a key, something only the Queen had. And then, a presence. Behind him, the air shifted. The guards stopped chasing. A deep, commanding voice echoed through the chamber. You cannot escape me, Ethan. Queen Syra arrives. Ethan turned slowly. Queen Syra stood at the entrance of the hangar bay, flanked by dozens of Zenari guards. She was calm, unshaken, as if she had expected this. Her violet eyes locked onto his. You are stronger than I imagined, she said softly. Your instincts are awakening. Ethan gripped the stolen blade tighter. Let me go. Syra tilted her head. Where would you go, my mate? Her words sent a chill through him. You don't own me, Ethan snapped. I'm not your mate. I'm not one of you. I am human. Interrupted. She took a slow step forward. Ethan tensed. You still cling to the past, she said. But there is nothing left for you, Ethan. Earth is gone. Humanity is gone. Ethan's chest tightened. Syra stepped even closer. Her presence was overwhelming, like gravity pulling him in. You were created for this, she whispered. For me. Ethan's mind screamed at him to fight, to resist, to deny it. But deep inside him, something stirred. That pull. That connection. His fists clenched. I don't believe in fate. Syra smiled. Soft, knowing. Neither do I. Before Ethan could react, she touched his forehead with 2 fingers. And in an instant, the world vanished. A vision of the past. Ethan wasn't in the hangar anymore. He was somewhere else. Memories, not his own, flooded his mind. He saw Earth, burning. The sky black with smoke, the oceans boiling. He saw Zenari ships in the distance, watching. He saw himself, standing beside Syra, wearing armor of gold. A king. A warrior. A leader. The vision snapped away. Ethan gasped, falling to his knees. His heart pounded like a war drum. Syra stood over him, her violet eyes filled with something deeper than possession. Now you understand, she whispered. Ethan trembled. He had seen it. The future, or the past. And for the first time since waking up, he didn't know who he really was. The ancient prophecy and a hidden truth. The visions faded, and Ethan collapsed onto the cold metal floor of the hangar bay, his breath ragged. His mind was on fire, struggling to process what he had just seen, memories that were not his own. No, they couldn't be his. But they felt real. He had seen Earth burning. He had seen himself standing beside Axira, wearing golden armor. He had seen the Zenari watching from their ships. His stomach twisted. Was that the past? The future? A lie? Ethan lifted his head, glaring at Zyra. What the hell did you do to me? Zyra stood above him, her violet eyes unreadable. I have only shown you the truth. He clenched his fists, forcing himself to stand despite the weight pressing down on him. Truth. No, that was a trick, a hallucination. Zyra stepped closer, her presence overwhelming. Then tell me, Ethan, why does it feel familiar? Ethan opened his mouth, but no words came. Because deep down, she was right. Something inside him recognized what he had seen. The armor, the battle, the destruction. It wasn't just a vision. It was a memory, the prophecy of the last human. Ethan turned away from her, gripping the side of a nearby console. His breathing was uneven, his mind racing. You keep saying I was meant for this, he muttered. Meant for you? What does that even mean? Zyra studied him for a moment before she spoke. There is a prophecy, she said finally, one that has existed for longer than any Zenari record. It speaks of a lost warrior, a being of two worlds, born in the ashes of the old, destined to shape the future of the galaxy. Ethan scoffed, shaking his head. Great, a prophecy. And let me guess, you think that's me? Zyra's expression did not change. It is not what I believe, Ethan. It is what the universe has already decided. Ethan turned sharply toward her. What does this prophecy actually say? Zyra raised a hand, and the air shimmered. A glowing ancient script materialized in front of them. Zenari runes swirling with golden light. Then, slowly, the words translated themselves into English. From the last of the forgotten ones, a ruler shall rise. Bound by the past, guided by fire, he will stand beside the eternal queen. His choice will forge the fate of all, light or shadow, war or peace. But should he turn away from his destiny, the stars themselves shall burn. Ethan stared at the words, his pulse pounding. This was insane. He was just a man, a soldier. He had lived an ordinary life on Earth, hadn't he? His thoughts drifted back to the visions, to the battle, to the armor he had worn. His throat felt dry. How old is this prophecy? Zyra stepped closer, older than the Zenari Empire itself. Ethan shook his head. And what? You just assumed it meant me. Zyra's gaze was steady. It was not an assumption. You were chosen. Your very existence was planned long before you were born. Ethan's jaw tightened. Planned by who? She hesitated. Then, with a voice barely above a whisper, she answered. By the Zenari High Council. Millennia ago. The experiment that created Ethan. Silence stretched between them. Ethan's hands curled into fists. Are you telling me? He said, his voice dangerously low. That the Zenari created me. Zyra did not blink. Not created. Enhanced. Ethan lunged at her, grabbing her by the wrist. Don't play with words. Did you take me from Earth? Did you put me in that pod? Zyra did not fight back. She simply looked at him, calm and unshaken. You were always meant for more than Earth, Ethan, she said softly. You are not fully human. Ethan's grip tightened. He could hear his own heart pounding, his blood roaring in his ears. You lie. But deep inside, he felt it. The inhuman strength in his limbs. The way his body healed faster than normal. The way his mind processed information at unnatural speeds. Had he ever truly been human? He shoved her away, his breath ragged. You had no right, he hissed. You had no right to take my life and turn it into whatever the hell this is. Zyra's expression softened for the first time, showing something he had never seen in her before. Regret. You are not a prisoner, Ethan, she whispered. You are free to choose your own path. But no matter what you choose, you cannot change what you are. Ethan turned away, his mind spinning. None of this made sense. None of it should be real. And yet, deep in his soul, something felt right about all of it. The pull toward Syra, the visions of war, the power inside him that had been dormant for so long. Who the hell was he? The breaking point. A shocking revelation. Syra watched him in silence before she spoke again. There is one more truth you must know. Ethan barely looked at her. What now? She took a slow breath. Earth was not destroyed by accident. It was erased. Ethan froze. A chilling sensation crawled up his spine. What do you mean, erased? Syra's voice was heavy. There was a war between the Zenari and the creatures that lived in the dark spaces between galaxies. The Zenari Council believed that Earth was a risk, that humanity's future could not be allowed to continue unchecked. Ethan's breath stopped. He turned slowly, his heart pounding. Are you saying the Zenari destroyed Earth? Syra lowered her gaze. It was a choice made long before I was queen, a decision made out of fear. Ethan felt something snap inside him. Rage. Pure, white-hot rage. You, his voice shook. Your people killed mine. And you expect me to believe I was destined to rule with you. Syra met his gaze, unflinching. I do not expect anything, Ethan. But you must decide. Will you let the past define you? Or will you take control of what is still left? Ethan turned away. His body trembled, his mind a storm of fury and confusion. Everything he knew was a lie. His past, his future, his very existence. And now he stood at a crossroads. He could never get Earth back, but he could decide what happened next. And one thing was certain. If the Zenari thought he would just accept this fate, they were dead wrong. Assassins and a betrayal. The rage inside Ethan burned like a star on the verge of collapse. His hands trembled as he clenched them into fists, his mind a whirlwind of anger and confusion. The Zenari destroyed Earth, and now they expected him to rule beside their queen. No, he would never forgive them. He stormed through the golden-lit corridors of the palace, his heart pounding. Syra had let him go, giving him time to think, but every second that passed only made the fury inside him grow. He needed to get out of here. He needed revenge. But first, he needed to survive. The silent attack. The palace halls were eerily empty. The Zenari guards, who usually patrolled every corner, were nowhere to be seen. The floating golden lights overhead flickered slightly, casting long shadows across the walls. Ethan's instincts screamed at him. Something was wrong. He slowed his steps, listening. The air was too still. No distant hum of machinery. No footsteps. Then, a whisper of movement. Ethan spun around, his muscles reacting before his mind could catch up. A blade slashed through the air, missing his throat by inches. He stumbled back, his heart hammering. Out of the shadows, a figure emerged. They were tall, cloaked in black, their armor different from the palace guards. Sleek, silent, deadly. Their helmet concealed their face, but their blade, curved, glowing with red energy, spoke volumes. This was not a palace guard. This was an assassin. And they weren't alone. More shadows moved. 3, 5, 7. Ethan's stomach twisted. This wasn't an attack. It was an execution. He was being hunted. The fight for survival. Ethan had no weapon, no armor, just his rage and his instincts. The first assassin lunged, blade flashing. Ethan dodged, his body moving faster than it should. His mind calculated the assassin's movements before they even finished attacking. Was this part of the enhancements the Zenari had given him? He didn't have time to wonder. He ducked low, grabbing the assassin's wrist and twisting, hard. A sickening crack filled the air as the assassin's arm snapped. The blade clattered to the ground. Ethan caught it mid-fall. The second assassin came from the side. Ethan pivoted, using his momentum to drive the stolen blade straight through their chest. A flash of red light. Then the assassin crumpled. The others hesitated for only a second. Then they attacked at once. The Queen's warning. The fight was brutal. Ethan was fast, faster than he had ever been before. His body was stronger, his reflexes sharper. He wasn't human anymore. Blades clashed. Sparks flew. Blood stained the golden floor. Ethan took down one assassin, then another. But there were too many. A sharp pain exploded in his side. He gasped as a blade slashed across his ribs. He stumbled back, pressing his hand to the wound. Warm blood seeped through his fingers. The remaining assassins circled him, waiting for him to fall. Then, a new voice echoed through the halls. Enough. The air shifted. The assassins froze. Ethan turned his head, his vision blurring slightly. Queen Syra stood at the end of the hall, her violet eyes glowing with power. She raised one hand, and the walls trembled. The golden energy that pulsed through the palace flared, surging outward. The assassins screamed. Their bodies convulsed, then collapsed. Dead. Ethan panted, his body trembling. His ribs ached, his vision swam. Zyra stepped closer, her gaze dark. "They almost killed you," she murmured. "You are not ready." Ethan clenched his jaw. "Was this you?" Zyra's eyes flashed with something dangerous. "No, but I expected it." Ethan's hands tightened into fists. "Who sent them?" Zyra hesitated for only a second. Then she said the words that changed everything. "The High Council." The betrayal of the Zenari High Council. Ethan's breath caught. "The Council," he repeated, his voice hoarse. "The same people who created me, who destroyed Earth." Zyra nodded. "They fear you, Ethan. They fear what you might become." Ethan stared at her, his chest rising and falling. "So what? They'd rather kill me than let your little prophecy come true." Zyra's expression darkened. "Yes." Ethan wiped the blood from his mouth. "Good. Then I'll kill them first." Zyra sighed. "You cannot simply kill the High Council. They control the Empire. If you want to stop them, you must be more than a warrior." She took another step forward, standing directly in front of him. "You must become something greater." Ethan met her gaze, the rage inside him still burning. "And what's that?" Zyra's lips parted slightly, her voice calm but firm. "A king. The impossible choice." Ethan stared at her, his heart pounding. A king. Him. No, that wasn't possible. But deep down, he knew the truth. The Zenari had taken everything from him. His life, his past, his world. And now, they were trying to erase him too. Maybe it was time to stop running. Maybe it was time to fight back. But to do that, he would have to become the very thing he hated most. A ruler, a leader, a Zenari king. His hands shook at the thought. Could he do it? Could he lead the people who had destroyed his own? Tyra reached out, her fingers brushing his arm. Her touch was cold, but comforting. "You do not have to decide now," she whispered. "But if you want justice, if you want to change the fate of this empire, then I will stand beside you." Ethan exhaled slowly, his chest heavy. He had come here looking for escape. Instead, he had found war. And the battle had just begun. The ultimate choice, love or freedom. Ethan Carter stood at the edge of the palace balcony, looking out over the sprawling Zenari capital. The city stretched beyond the horizon, a maze of floating structures, golden spires, and energy highways that pulsed with power. The sky above was not blue but a deep violet, streaked with silver clouds that drifted lazily over a planet he still didn't understand. The air here was heavier than Earth's, but his body had adjusted quickly. Too quickly. Another reminder that he wasn't fully human anymore. His ribs still ached from the assassin's attack, but the wound had healed faster than it should have. He clenched his fists, staring down at the people below. Zenari citizens moved through the streets like nothing had changed, like their rulers hadn't just tried to kill him. The High Council wanted him dead. Xera had saved him, but that only raised a bigger question. Why? He heard footsteps behind him. Light. Controlled. Styra. He didn't turn around. Why do they hate me so much? He asked, his voice quiet. Xera stepped beside him, her violet eyes scanning the horizon. Because you are an unknown variable. The Council does not fear the prophecy, Ethan. They fear what you might choose to do with it. Ethan exhaled slowly. And what if I choose to burn this entire empire to the ground? Xera didn't flinch. Then I would burn with it. That made him turn. Why? Xera finally met his gaze, her expression unreadable. Because I have already made my choice. A strange silence passed between them, heavy with meaning. Ethan looked away first. He had never asked for this. He had never wanted to be anyone's fated mate, lost warrior, or king. He just wanted the truth. And now that he had it, he didn't know what to do with it. The temptation of freedom. You still have a choice, Xera said. Softer now. There are those in the outer systems who would take you in. I could help you disappear. You would never have to see this place again. Ethan froze. Disappear, he echoed. Xera nodded. I would tell the Council you died in the attack. The prophecy would die with you. You would be free. Free. The word felt foreign in his mouth. For a moment, he allowed himself to imagine it. A stolen Zenari ship. A distant planet. A quiet life, far from politics, from fate, from the war that was brewing around him. No more running. No more fighting. Just freedom. It was so tempting. He turned back to Xera. And what happens to you if I leave? Xera's face remained neutral, but he saw the flicker of emotion in her eyes. I will rule alone, she said, or they will replace me. Ethan frowned. Replace. Xera's voice turned colder. The High Council does not need me, Ethan. They need a ruler who obeys them. If I refuse to act against you, they will install another in my place. Ethan's stomach twisted. They'd kill you. Xera nodded once. Or worse. Ethan clenched his jaw. And you're willing to let that happen? I am willing to let you choose, she corrected. That is what matters to me. Her words cut through him sharper than any blade. This wasn't a trick. She wasn't manipulating him. She was genuinely giving him an out, and that made everything so much harder. The moment of truth. Ethan took a step back, his thoughts racing. He had spent so long fighting to escape, fighting against this empire, against its queen, against his own fate. And now he could walk away. No more assassins, no more High Council, no more Xera. His heartbeat quickened at that last thought. No more Xera. He turned to look at her again. She was powerful, terrifying, regal. And yet, in this moment, she seemed almost vulnerable. She had never forced him to stay, never demanded his loyalty. She had only ever asked. Ethan ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. You could have lied to me, he muttered. You could have made this easier. Xera's lips twitched into the faintest hint of a smile. I don't believe in easy choices. Ethan let out a rough exhale. Yeah, no kidding. He turned back to the city. The High Council wanted him dead. If he left, they'd take control of the empire. They'd rule the Zenari with an iron grip. If he stayed, he would be at war with them. But if he stayed, Xera wouldn't die. She had saved his life more times than he could count. She had told him the truth, even when it meant losing him. And for reasons he didn't fully understand, the thought of her standing alone against the High Council made something twist in his chest. He closed his eyes. Then he made his choice. The decision. Ethan turned back to Xera, meeting her gaze. I'm staying. Xera didn't react at first, but in her eyes, Something shifted. Something relieved. Something grateful. "You are certain?" she asked. Ethan smirked, though his heart still pounded. "Not even a little. But if I run now, I'll never forgive myself." Zyra studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded. "You will need to prove yourself," she warned. "The council will not accept you so easily." Ethan rolled his shoulders, cracking his knuckles. "Let them try. The war begins." As the two of them stood side by side, a voice echoed through the palace halls. A Zenari officer rushed toward them, his face pale with urgency. "My queen, the council has declared you unfit to rule." Ethan and Zyra exchanged looks. It had begun. There was no turning back now. Ethan had made his choice, not because of the prophecy, not because of destiny, but because this fight, it was his. War and the final decision. The great halls of the Zenari High Palace trembled as alarms blared across the city. The golden sky, once peaceful, was now filled with warships, their sleek black hulls blocking out the twin suns above. Energy shields flickered around the towering spires, straining against the force of an incoming siege. The war had begun, and Ethan Carter stood at the center of it all. His heart pounded as he watched the Zenari elite guards take their positions around the palace perimeter. Below, in the city streets, legions of rebels, those still loyal to Zyra, clashed with forces sent by the High Council. Ethan clenched his fists, breathing heavily. He had spent his whole life believing he was just a man, just a soldier, human, mortal, insignificant in the grand scheme of the universe. But now he was leading a war to decide the fate of an empire. Zyra stood beside him, dressed in full battle regalia, her violet eyes sharp with determination. She looked at him, not as a ruler, not as a prophecy, but as an equal. "This is it," she murmured. "The council will stop at nothing to erase us." Ethan exhaled. "Then we stop them first." The council's betrayal. A deep, resonant voice echoed through the city, projected through the council's fleet above. "Queen Zyra is unfit to rule. She has broken the sacred traditions. The outsider, Ethan Carter, is a danger to the empire. He must be executed. The Zenari must remain pure." Ethan gritted his teeth. So that was it. They had never wanted peace, never wanted a choice. To them, he was nothing more than a mistake. But mistakes could fight back. Zyra turned to him, her voice calm despite the chaos. "You don't have to do this, Ethan." Ethan let out a short, breathless laugh. "Pretty sure I crossed that line a while ago." She searched his face. "They won't stop. Even if we win today, they will try again. You could leave. Live your own life somewhere far from here." Ethan met her gaze, "and let them keep this empire under their control." He shook his head. "No, that's not happening." A flicker of something passed over her face. Pride. Gratitude. Maybe something deeper. Then, without another word, the battle began. The fall of the High Council. The Zenari fleet descended in a storm of fire. Energy cannons rained down on the palace shields, causing them to flicker and weaken. Ethan barely had time to react before the first wave of enemy soldiers broke through the lower gates. Ethan and Zyra led the charge. The moment he hit the battlefield, something inside him awakened. His body moved on instinct, faster, stronger, more precise than ever before. His reflexes outmatched even the elite Zenari warriors. Every time a blade came for him, he was already moving, countering, striking. His enemies fought with discipline. He fought like a storm. He grabbed an enemy soldier by the arm, twisted it, and sent them flying with a single powerful throw. Another came at him with a plasma lance. He dodged it, disarmed them in half a second, and slammed the weapon into their chest. Beside him, Zyra fought like a force of nature. She didn't just command her soldiers, she led them. Her energy-infused blades cut through the air with deadly grace, and every strike was followed by a ripple of golden light, throwing enemies back. The battle raged for what felt like hours. Then, finally, they reached the Council's command chamber. The choice that decides the future. The High Council chamber was nothing like Ethan had expected. There were no grand rulers, no wise elders. Just a room filled with cold, calculating Zenari standing around a glowing projection of the Empire. They didn't even flinch when the doors burst open. One of them, an older Zenari with piercing white eyes, stepped forward. "You have already lost," he said. "You may have won this battle, but the Zenari will never follow a half-breed king." Ethan's jaw clenched. "I'm not trying to be a king." The elder smirked. "Then you are a fool." Cyrus stepped beside him. "Enough of this. Surrender, and we will spare you." The elder laughed. "Spare us?" He gestured to the map of the Empire. "Do you not see, my queen? We control the fleets. We control the outer systems. Even if you execute us, others will rise in our place. You cannot change what the Zenari are." Ethan's hands tightened into fists. He could feel it, the weight of the moment. This wasn't just a battle. It wasn't just about revenge. It was about choosing the future of an entire empire. And he had to decide, right now. Path 1. Ruthless Conqueror. Ethan could end this war in blood. He could kill the High Council right here, right now. Take the throne. Rule through fear and power. The Empire would obey him, because they would have no other choice. But would that make him any different from them? Would that make him the very thing he hated? Path 2. A new beginning. Or he could change everything. Break the cycle. Burn their laws to the ground and build something new. A Zenari empire that wasn't built on bloodlines and tradition, but on choice. It would be harder. It would take time. But maybe, just maybe, he could turn this empire into something better. Syra watched him carefully. The High Council sneered, waiting to see what kind of man he truly was. Ethan took a slow breath. Then he made his final decision. Epilogue. The road ahead. The war didn't end in a single day. But Ethan's choice that day shaped the future. The Zenari Empire would never be the same. Some accepted the change. Some resisted. But Ethan and Syra stood side by side, not because of fate, but because they chose to. And as they looked to the stars, a mysterious transmission came through. A human distress signal. Ethan's heart stopped. Earth was supposed to be gone. Then who was calling for help? This wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning.